Hi guys, Jonathan here with another weapon, and I'm sure I've said this before, but this one is a little bit special. This is in fact, well, it's a Webley Mk IV Revolver. We'll cover some of the basics of that in a moment, but I have to jump in and show you why this is so significant and why I was so excited to grab this from the drawers earlier. This particular nickel-plated Mk IV belonged to the White Star Line, as the marking on the front strap proclaims. Now, some of you might not know what the White Star Line was. Those of you who do will immediately be thinking Titanic. So, we'll come back to that in a little bit. But tremendously exciting to have refound, I suppose. Someone here must have known what this was, but I didn't realise we had a White Star Line revolver. The National Maritime Museum at Greenwich has one that's there on their website, and I remember looking at that enviously, thinking, I wish we had one of those. Well, we did. So, for those of you who don't know, and there is an excellent Sea and Arsenal video on the Webley Marshall revolvers that you might like to check out after this. The Mk IV, well, as the name would imply, the fourth iteration of the Mk I, which was introduced in 1887 into British military service. .455 caliber. It's a fairly iconic series of revolvers, but there are two iconic variants of it. This one, known for its service in the Boer War, perhaps more so than its connection to White Star Line, and the Mk VI, which is the definitive First World War variant. From 1887 we go to 1894 with the Mk II. The changes there are pretty minor. 1897 for the Mk III. This is essentially a Mk III with improved metallurgy. A couple of minor changes. The cylinder stops. The cutouts on the cylinder that literally, when the thing is cocked, stop the cylinder in place so it lines up with the barrel. Those are larger, wider and deeper to make them more efficient. Other than that, there isn't much to choose between this and the Mk III, and those of you guessing online may well have got the wrong model, and don't feel bad about it because it's only a silhouette. At this time, and during the Boer War and up to the First World War, the 4-inch barrel was standard, which, to be honest, makes a bit more sense for a sidearm. By the time of the Mk VI, the classic First World War Mk VI, you've got a full 6-inch barrel on there. Sort of looks more imposing and maybe cooler, but it isn't really gaining you a great deal of extra velocity or accuracy over this thing. This also still has the smooth curved backstrap of the early Marks, not the humped backstrap of the Mk VI, which probably is an improvement in terms of recoil control and handling. Now, other than the very exciting White Star Line marking, we do have a retailer on here, and it is W. Richards of Liverpool. Not Wesley Richards. In fact, amusingly, there's a page on the Wesley Richards website explaining why W. Richards is nothing to do with Wesley Richards. We don't even necessarily know, it might be William, what his first name was. But he's just a retailer of, among other things, firearms, based in Liverpool, Tithe Barn Street, as it proclaims on the top strap here. Now, obviously, the Liverpool connection is interesting. Not just interesting, but connected to White Star Line, headquarters in Liverpool. The Titanic itself registered in Liverpool, although it was built in Belfast. So this all lines up very nicely with the story of Titanic. The sort of sad news in a way is that it's pretty unlikely that this could have been associated with that particular ship. For me, and I hope you as well, the White Star Line Association is enough. We can use this to talk about Titanic, but since all of the Titanic's weapons are on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, as far as we know, this was not on Titanic. There is a window of time there. This was sold in 1909 to this retailer, presumably sold on to White Star Line within the same year, perhaps the year after. So there's a very small window of time before the maiden voyage in April 1912. We've just missed the 112th anniversary of the sinking, by the way. But a very small window of time for this to have been stored on Titanic and then taken off before the ship took that fateful maiden voyage. However, it's not inconceivable that this could have been part of the complement of RMS Olympic, which did survive not only the Atlantic Ocean in 1912, but the First World War, and was decommissioned in peacetime in 1935. It is possible that this came from the decommissioning of RMS Olympic. Lots of other possibilities, though. There are a dozen plus ocean liners that this could have seen service on. It's even potentially disappointingly possible that this could have never left shore. Now, I don't think so, because next to and overlapping that engraving there, you probably saw it, is quite a lot of wear. So this is a nickel-plated finish. It looks like White Star Line, in common with a lot of maritime organisations, went for a robust finish on their firearms. The salt air of the sea, of course, very corrosive. So some sort of hard, durable finish to protect the metal of the gun, pretty important. Bluing is beautiful, but any amount of wear to that and you're going to get rust forming. You'd have to keep them scrupulously clean. So the nickel finish in itself, not exclusive by any means to either White Star or any other maritime user, but again, it lines up with the marking, with the retailer being from Liverpool. And from everything we know from the records, from the trial testimony that exists, Webley revolvers were the ship's armament for keeping order, essentially. So as far as we know, each Olympic class ship would have had 4 of these available for issuing out. They weren't carried on board, and they were there much like a police station of the day, or a bank, or anywhere that needed protection weapons. They would be issued out in the case of an emergency. We have really good quotes from Second Officer Lightoller, which kind of shed some light on this. So Lightoller says, this is in his memoirs, Titanic and Other Ships. It was about this time, this is the launching of Lifeboat 6. It was about this time that the chief officer came over from the starboard side and said, "Did I know where the firearms were?" I told the chief officer, "Yes, I know where they are. Come along and I'll get them for you." And into the first officer's cabin we went. So they're kept in the first officer's cabin. The chief, Murdoch, the captain and myself, where I hauled them out, still all in their pristine newness and grease. I was going out when the chief shoved one of the revolvers into my hands with a handful of ammunition and said, "Here you are, you may need it." Later on, Lightoller's, he's in the water, the ship having foundered, and he comments on the weight of this thing. For a time, I wondered what was making it so difficult for me to keep my head above the water. Time and again, I went under, until it dawned on me that it was the great Webley revolver still in my pocket that was dragging me down. I soon sent that on its downward journey. And that, of course, is where the 4 revolvers of the Titanic still are today. This, of course, raises the rather fraught question of, were these things fired in the sinking of the Titanic? And I think we can safely say that they were. There's a bit of a narrative after the sinking that everything was calm. You know, the band played on and everyone went down, stiff upper lip. But it's pretty clear from multiple testimonies that pistols had to be fired. Not necessarily at people, although it's pretty clear that some were fired at people. One of the firearms that definitely was fired was not one of these 4 revolvers. This was 5th Officer Lowe, and he was firing his Browning automatic. Probably an FN Browning model 1900. We don't quite know. He says in one of the inquiries that it's an 8-shot, I think. So he's not, at that point, he's not remembering how many shots his pistol held, but you can +1 an FN 1900 and make it an 8-shot. So there are a couple of different things it could have been, but the 1900 is probably correct. And we know that Lowe fired at least 2 shots between the hull of the ship and the descending, or the lifeboat adjacent to it, to discourage people from climbing aboard. Now, when I say people, by and large, possibly exclusively, those people were men. There was a standing custom at the time that was being enforced that literally women and children first. Some men were invited onto lifeboats and accepted that reluctantly, almost certainly, once it became apparent that no more women and children could be brought on board that particular lifeboat. But up to the point of keeping spaces free for women and children was the primary goal. So if men got too aggressive in trying to secure themselves a place, some of them, at least one, just jumped down into the boat. They might, they'd be hopefully scared off by gunshots. If not, it seems pretty clear that some were shot. So the theory, of course, being that too many people on board and it will sink or it will capsize and everyone will die. So the very difficult decision to be made there, and the same for when the lifeboats are in the water and you're having to fend off your fellow passengers potentially, is do you essentially kill others to save the people already in the boat? And this is what gives rise to, for example, the scene in the 1997 Titanic movie where First Officer Murdoch is shown to shoot a passenger who's trying to climb into one of the boats, and then out of, I think, sheer horror at what he's done, shoot himself. That's where that came from. James Cameron, who directed and conceived that movie, apologised later for depicting Murdoch in that light. It's complicated, I think, is the answer. The multiple testimony of one of the ship's officers shooting passengers, or more than one probably, because these eyewitnesses are in different parts of the ship, and multiple witnesses to an officer having shot one of the passengers shooting himself. So we won't dwell on who that may have been. We don't actually know, but sadly, these are not just carried for show. In fact, the opposite. They're kept in the first officer's cabin. They're issued out to the senior officers on board ship, and they're then tasked with keeping order in one of the worst situations it's possible to imagine, frankly. So I really think this is a fantastic artifact in a number of ways. It shows us a typical maritime pistol, non-military, non-naval sidearm of the day. It shows us specifically a genuine White Star Line issue revolver. I can't show you that enough. It's the single most important thing about this. It evokes, the period. It evokes the choice of a Marshall style pistol, the same thing that the British military was using at the time, but in this nickel finish. And the idea that you can be on, either a pleasure cruise or starting a new life on the other side of the world or something, and just in case things go wrong, there's this hint of sort of militarism beneath the surface. And of course, it makes your mind race with the possibilities of which ship or ships did this see service on. Chances are more than one. Almost certainly not on the Titanic, but I do like to hold out some hope for RMS Olympic. Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys. We do appreciate it. As always, remember to do the usual YouTube things, liking, subscribing, that sort of thing. Come and visit one of our 3 museums in the UK if you're able to do that. Check out our various social media channels. You can check out the Expert React series over on GameSpot as well if you're interested in that. Speaking of our museums, our exhibition Reloaded is still on at the moment, so there's another chance to come and see that. But however you choose to find us, I hope you'll find us here again next week.